The atmosphere in the studio was electric, buzzing with anticipation as the camera panned across the excited live audience. Every seat was filled, phones were already recording, and the set lights bathed the stage in a glowing blue hue. Trevor Noah walked in smoothly, flashing his signature smile, his voice echoing through the room as he teased the night's segment. With practiced charm, he glanced toward the audience and announced, "Tonight's guest is someone who's been making waves, a firecracker from the GOP, Karoline Leavitt." The crowd clapped, some hesitantly, others with genuine curiosity. Then, as the announcer echoed her name again, Karoline emerged from backstage. She wasn't smiling. Her stride was firm, her eyes scanning the crowd with the focus of someone entering enemy territory. Dressed in a sharp red blazer and jet black heels, she exuded purpose. She shook Trevor's hand with a brief nod, not lingering for pleasantries. Trevor gestured toward the guest chair, and she sat gracefully but upright, legs crossed, hands folded. Trevor gave a slight laugh, trying to warm the moment, and opened with a light political joke, something about her youth and still being in political kindergarten. The audience chuckled softly, but Karoline didn't even twitch a smile. Her eyes locked on him with a dead seriousness that instantly shifted the tone. Trevor raised his eyebrows, clearly not expecting the cold response. "Tough crowd," he quipped, attempting recovery. Karoline leaned forward, her voice sharp yet steady, slicing through the laughter. "I'm not here to play games, Trevor. I came for a real conversation. Let's talk facts." The crowd went silent. A few audible gasps scattered through the seats. Trevor leaned back slightly, caught off guard by the sudden switch in control. She wasn't just ready, she was armed. Trevor tried to lighten the air again. All right, we're doing this the serious way," he said, glancing at the camera. But Karoline didn't flinch. Her gaze didn't waver. She'd studied this moment, prepared for it. Her tone held the weight of someone tired of narrative games. "You spend a lot of time mocking people like me. But do you ever actually listen?" she said bluntly. Trevor opened his mouth, but nothing came out right away. The audience leaned forward. Tension pulsed in the room. The battle had already begun. Trevor tried to laugh it off, leaning casually on the armrest of his chair. "Look, Karoline, I joke about a lot of things. That's kind of the point of this show," he said, waving a hand like it was all harmless fun. But Karoline didn't budge. Her voice cut through his charm like a razor. "It's not harmless when millions take your words as truth." The air grew denser. Even the cameramen paused slightly in their motions. She leaned in just enough to command the space between them, her expression unwavering. "You mock people's values, twist their words, and pretend it's just comedy. But when your jokes become headlines, it stops being funny." Trevor raised an eyebrow, still searching for control of the narrative. "You think I twist facts? I talk about what's already out there. You guys make it easy." The audience chuckled, but it was nervous now, unsure where this was going. Karoline's eyes narrowed, her tone cool and deliberate. "Then let's get into what's already out there, shall we?" She pulled out a folded sheet of paper from the inside of her blazer. Trevor glanced at it, amused, but that amusement evaporated when she began reading. "On June 13th, you said my campaign's talking points were written by a dinosaur from the 1950s. But that same day, I gave a speech citing bipartisan economic strategies. You clipped the part you didn't like." She didn't wait for him to respond. "September 22nd, you called my views anti-woman, but failed to mention that I led an initiative funding single working mothers in my district. October 3rd, you claimed I ignored climate policy. My exact quote was, 'We need environmental responsibility, not federal overreach.' But you cut that, too." The room was still. Even Trevor looked caught off guard. He shifted slightly, lips pressed together, unsure of the next move. Karoline wasn't finished. "You use editing to win laughs, not arguments," she said firmly. "And people who don't watch the full speeches only get your spin. That's not comedy, Trevor. That's manipulation." There was a murmur in the audience. Some clapped instinctively. Others looked genuinely stunned. Trevor looked down, chuckling under his breath, buying time. Wow, he finally said. Someone came loaded. Karoline's tone didn't change. I came prepared. That's different. The tension grew heavier. Trevor had lost the upper hand, and everyone watching could feel it. He straightened up, the playful tone gone. So, what? You're saying I'm a propagandist now? Karoline didn't blink. I'm saying your platform has power. And when you use it to mock instead of understand, you become part of the very problem you pretend to ridicule. Her words lingered in the air like smoke. There was no laughter this time, only silence. Trevor's expression shifted as the silence pressed in around him. The charming host veneer began to crack. He leaned forward, his voice tightening. You don't get to come on my show and lecture me about how I do my job, he said, each word sharper than the last. The audience reacted with a mix of shock and discomfort. He wasn't joking anymore. His face was no longer playful. It was flushed, his jaw visibly clenched. Karoline didn't flinch. She sat upright, her eyes locked on his, unmoved by the rising heat in his tone. Then maybe, she said coldly, you shouldn't invite people who know how to fight back. A few gasps rippled through the audience like aftershocks. The energy in the room had flipped. Trevor blinked, almost confused by how quickly he had lost command of the moment. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, searching for something witty to salvage the tension. Nothing came. Karoline didn't give him time. You brought me here thinking I'd be just another easy target, she said with a slight tilt of her head. You expected me to smile, nod, and let you have your moment. But I came for truth, not entertainment. Trevor shot back. Truth. You've got your version of it, and I've got mine. That's what makes this country great. We can disagree. He smiled again, but this time it was forced, the muscles around his eyes tight. Karoline leaned in, lowering her voice slightly but keeping the same piercing tone. Disagreement is one thing. Misrepresentation is another. You pretend to be neutral while pushing narratives that humiliate anyone who doesn't agree with you. That's not disagreement. That's deceit. The studio was dead quiet now. No one dared laugh, clap, or interrupt. Every word seemed to hang in midair, sharp as glass. Trevor's chest rose and fell faster, and he finally stood up, yanking his jacket slightly as if shaking off the moment. All right, if this is how it's going to go, then go ahead, finish your speech. His voice had turned dry, bitter. But Karoline remained seated, perfectly composed. No speech, she said calmly. Just truth. And it's obviously something you're not used to hearing face to face. Trevor stepped toward the audience slightly, gesturing with both hands. This is what we're doing now. Conservative rage theater. You want to play the victim while on national television. But his words didn't land the way they usually did. The audience wasn't laughing. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked glued to the moment, unsure whose side to pick. Karoline exhaled slowly and replied, I'm not playing the victim. I'm just not playing along with your script. Her refusal to rise to his bait only intensified the imbalance. Trevor stared at her for a few seconds too long, visibly rattled. He turned toward the camera crew. We might need a break, he muttered, almost inaudibly, forgetting he still had a live mic on. The moment was unraveling fast, and for the first time in a long time, Trevor Noah looked like the guest on his own show. As Trevor stood there, caught between outrage and disbelief, the studio screens behind them began to flicker, updating in real time with a flurry of live tweets, headlines, and social media clips. Within seconds, the hashtag Karoline Unleashed began trending, flashing across the massive LED wall behind the stage. The audience turned slightly in their seats, noticing the growing storm erupting outside the studio. Dozens of tweets poured in. Karoline just body slammed Trevor Noah live. Is this the end of the liberal comedy empire? Trevor looked like he saw a ghost. Trevor's eyes darted to the screen. His face tightened. He wasn't used to seeing his show hijacked like this, not from a guest, and certainly not from someone who had just dismantled his confidence on air. He tried to speak, but the moment had shifted far beyond his grasp. Karoline, still seated calmly, turned her head slightly toward the camera, her voice cool and precise. People at home aren't blind. They know what's happening here. They've been hungry for honesty, and they can tell the difference between a scripted punchline and a real conversation. The camera cut to a wide shot. Karoline's posture was striking, composed, centered, and completely in control. Trevor, by contrast, remained standing with his arms crossed and lips pressed together, looking less like a host and more like a man waiting for the curtain to fall. He finally spoke again, but there was a tremor in his voice now. "You think you're speaking for all of America," he said, gesturing vaguely. "You think just because a few angry tweets go viral, you've won something." Karoline turned slowly to face him. "I'm not here for a trophy. I'm here because millions are tired of being talked down to by people who pretend to be smarter than them. You mock, dismiss, and label, but the American people are done letting you define them." The words hit harder than any scripted monologue. Even the backstage crew, watching from behind the curtain, could sense the magnitude of the moment. The control room flicked to another trending tweet. Karoline Leavitt just flipped the media script, live, raw, and unfiltered. The screen behind them split into a side-by-side image of Karoline speaking and Trevor's stunned reaction. It played in a loop on network streams and fan accounts within minutes. The show, once intended to be a routine sparring match for laughs, had morphed into something bigger, a full-on cultural moment. Trevor's smirk from earlier had completely vanished. He adjusted his jacket again, sighed heavily, and tried to look composed, but it was clear to everyone in the room, the tide had turned, and Karoline wasn't just holding her ground, she was rewriting it. As the audience sat in stunned silence, the camera slowly zoomed in on Karoline's face. She met its lens without blinking, her voice ringing with quiet defiance. "They call it comedy. I call it camouflage. But tonight, we pulled the mask off." The room remained frozen for several seconds. No laughter, no applause, just the echo of her words and the flickering tweets illuminating the stage like sparks before an explosion. Trevor finally took a deep breath, stepping back toward his chair, trying to reclaim the air of authority he once owned so naturally. But everything about him now seemed smaller. His voice, his presence, even his posture. Karoline hadn't just disrupted the segment, she had dismantled the performance. He gestured toward the cue cards lying on his desk, a subtle signal to his team, but it was too late to shift gears. The audience wasn't interested in light-hearted segues or scripted jokes anymore. They were still locked on her, eyes wide, stunned by what they had just witnessed. Karoline sat unmoved, letting the tension breathe, not rushing to fill the silence like most guests would. Trevor's next words came more measured, slower, but lacked the conviction his fans were used to. "Well, Karoline," he said, forcing a smile, "this wasn't quite the comedy show I thought we'd have tonight." The chuckle he let out didn't echo. No one followed. Karoline folded her hands in her lap, her tone now calm, even gracious. "That's because the American people are done laughing when there's nothing funny about how they're treated. They're tired of being the punchline." Her words weren't loud, but they struck deep. Trevor looked down, avoiding eye contact, then up again, trying to steady his breath. He attempted one last pivot. "Look, we bring people on this show to have conversations, even if we disagree. I may push back, I may joke, but I don't attack." Karoline leaned forward slightly, her gaze firm but composed. "Then maybe it's time to look at the difference between satire and smugness. Because from where I'm sitting, the line's been crossed for a long time." A few heads in the audience nodded subtly. The applause sign flickered in the background, but no one clapped. The audience wasn't following studio prompts anymore, they were following the moment. Karoline slowly stood up, adjusting her blazer. Trevor remained seated. She didn't wait for a closing line or offer him a final word. Instead, she turned toward the audience, made eye contact with several viewers in the front row, and said, "You all deserve better than filtered narratives and political theater. Demand truth, even if it's uncomfortable." Then she turned and walked off stage. No dramatic exit, no lingering glance, Just quiet resolve. The studio was still. Trevor finally stood, clapping his hands together once, weakly. Okay, he said with a half laugh. We'll be right back after this, maybe. It was the first time his voice cracked on air. The screen faded to black, and the control room cut the feed seconds faster than usual, unsure what else to do. Outside, the internet erupted. Clips of the confrontation flooded every major platform. Memes, breakdowns, and instant headlines blared the same message. Trevor Noah had been silenced, not by censorship, but by a guest who came armed with nothing but facts, clarity, and unshakable composure.